Salut everyone! In this video, we'll be talking about the 9070 XT, how it works on Linux versus Windows, and if it is ready like a card you should get right now for your PC. Are you ready? Let's get into it. As always, let's start with a little bit of context. The first thing I want to mention is that as I'm recording this video, the 9070 XT has been released less than 2 weeks ago. So when it comes to driver on Linux, it's kind of unfair to compare them to Windows. But I'm going to still be doing it because I think there is still a value added in it. I want you to understand why it's so unfair. The AMD team has been only working on the Windows driver because they need to provide a card to like the main buyer, which are mainly on Windows, unfortunately. They need to provide like a good experience out of the box. So all the features, even if it's not perfect, we'll talk about it after, they are there. You can use ROCm, you can have like FSR 4, there is some tweaks that need to be done, but you can use it. On Linux, none of those are actually available as we speak. None of them. And the reason behind it is like the developer on Linux, which is mainly like people from the community, they need to have access to the card. They need to have access to the source code or to the SDK, which will be like used to enable those features. I'm thinking about FSR 4 right now. So when you understand that, you will get that those drivers on Linux, they need to mature, and they need to mature a lot compared to the one on Windows. Now, the good news is that only after 1 week of release on Linux, you can see the improvement. I made a selection of like 16 games for my benchmark panel. Day one, the actual like card, I made a video about it, was running properly on CachyOS. Everything was fine, except like some of the games, they wouldn't launch. So on 16 games, only 4 were totally unusable. Only 4, which means like 75% of the game were running properly and had no issue at all. It started to kind of like break for those 4 games. What I did, I kept a list and I redid the test 1 week after. And 1 week after, 100% of the game were actually working. So on the 16 games, 60 of them were running nicely on Linux. So there is still some bug left and right, but they are running, they are not like crashing repeatedly. It's fine. And so you can see like on 1 week, we went from 75% to 100% of my little panel of game running on Linux. And this is great. Now for the other key feature, you understand that it's gonna take way more time. So I know like ROCm, my guess is like it's gonna be like ready in like 2 or 3 months from now because again like the dev have to work on it. They need to gather the feedback from the Linux community, some exchange, and because of the complexity of the Mesa stack, you know, like the cycle release still need to be followed. Like you can't just rush things because there is a new like GPU in the stack. But I would say like in my opinion, like the support will be like almost perfect, like in 3 months for everything related to ROCm and the technical like part of the driver. For the feature like FSR 4, I think it's gonna take way more time, simply because the AMD team need to provide the SDK for FSR 4. And I read somewhere, I won't share my news, like you're gonna have to take my word, but I read somewhere that it's gonna take at least like 3 months for them to deliver the SDK. And then you're gonna have to have like a little bit extra work from the community to implement those new, like, I would call that like variable, I don't know if it's a technical word, but like those new function in the actual driver on Linux, like in Vulkan. So I would say like it will take around like 4 months to 6 months to have like FSR 4 correctly implemented on Linux. So take that with a grain of salt because it might be way faster or it might be like way slower. This is just my opinion on the subject. But I want you to be aware of that, because if you are in market and you want to use like the 9070 XT right off the bat on Linux, it's gonna be complicated. But more into that after. Another point I want to mention related to the 9070 XT is that you need to be careful when you choose the model. So there is different brand out there, and all those brands, they come with different features. I made a full video about it. I'm going to put the link in the description. But what I'm trying to explain here is like, be really careful about the model you want. For example, if you want like the full performance, or if you want the cheapest one, etc., because there is like some tricks that you're gonna have to go through and debunk. This is gonna have an impact directly on the performance of the card. What I noticed is that my card, which is in my opinion like one of the best out of the box, is overclocking itself above the manufacturer limit. So it's kind of weird. Again, my video like is totally talking about it, but to give you an idea, if I launch a game like Cyberpunk without overclocking the card, I will be around like 200 megahertz above the OC of my AIB. Okay, and I will be around like almost like 300 megahertz above the AMD settings. So, you know, it's kind of confusing, but I've noticed that some of those cards, they overclock themselves really easily, and some of them, they are kind of like struggling, I would say, a little bit more. On top of that, my result right now might be totally different from what are they gonna be in like 1 or 2 months when the driver gets better, right? Because I also believe that the fact that the frequency is going all over the place, and in my case, like it's auto overclocking itself, is related to the poor support of the driver as it is right now. So it could be a feature in the future, but as it is right now, again, like, you know, like keep that in mind. We are only like 1 week and a half after release, and everything is all over the place, whether you are on Windows or Linux. Now let's go into the benchmark number, the thing you have been waiting for like I don't know many minutes into the video. So first, let's talk about my PC for benchmarking. I'm running a 9800 X3D overclock with PBO. I got the latest generation of RAM, which is like DDR5 6000 CL26. I've been OCing the CPU to 5.5 gigahertz. My RAM has also like been OC'd, especially with the sub timing. We are at a ready like fully optimized setup. For the GPU, I didn't touch anything, but as I mentioned earlier, like this GPU, like kind of like OC itself, I need to share with you that the maximum frequency that my GPU will be running, depending on the game, will be around like 3,350 megahertz. But I would say in average, it will be at 3,260, 3,270 megahertz. So take that in consideration, because if you are not lucky on the GPU like bin, chipset bin, you might have results which are a little bit lower than the one I got. I don't have any control on like the way the graphic card like auto overclock itself, and I think it's important to take that in consideration when you see those numbers. When it comes to the methodology of the benchmark, I really wanted to make sure that we will be like comparing the game in an environment which actually look like what most of us will do while gaming. So I decided to do a bench with FSR enabled. So having an upscaler enabled while gaming, and depending on the game, I also decided to activate frame generation. Some of you, they might not be happy about that. Don't be worried, there is only one game. I did activate frame generation, but I think it's going to be really important through the number to understand like where we actually are at in terms of performance between Windows and Linux. For the operating system, on one hand, I'm running CachyOS for Linux and Windows 11 24H2 totally debloated. On both of the systems, they are all optimized. Everything is set up correctly. This is the type of performance you should get with the same hardware on your machine. And for the games themselves, I went from like 16 games tested on stream to a choice of only 4 games. And you will see why, because I want to test game which have first a benchmark included, because this is really what I've been looking for, like the game benchmark, rather than adding a third-party application that can sometimes like impact the performance. And the second one, my second way of, you say, like of benching those games is to load the game at a certain point for the games that do not incorporate any benchmark, and check the FPS at this specific point. So let me know in the comment below if you are agreeing with this methodology or not. But overall, you will see like I'm going to be aligned with most of the professional benchmarker out there. They use like a third-party application. But this is my methodology for this video. Let's start with Cyberpunk 77. This game is my go-to when it comes to benchmark. The first thing I want to mention is that the benchmark itself was not working on Linux, so I had to use a specific spot and look at a specific point to see where we're at in terms of performance and FPS. And on this graph, what we are looking at is Cyberpunk running with ray tracing, ultra setting, and frame generation set to on. I have the FSR free upscaler on both quality and performance to give you an idea of what you could expect in terms of FPS and what will be the difference between Windows and Linux. The first thing that show up is that if you are moving from Windows to Linux, you're gonna lose between 44% and 43% if you are using ray tracing on Linux. And this is really important to notice because I've been talking about the poor performance on ray tracing on Linux for more than a year now on my RTX 4090. And I was not sure at the time if the performance decrease was related to the driver or to the Wine/Proton stack. And you can see here is that the performance is also poor on AMD. So it's definitely not related to the drivers themselves, but I believe it's related to the Wine/Proton stack here. And yeah, it's gonna be a pretty big slap in your face if you want to use heavy ray tracing in this game on Linux. Now, the good news is that even if you are being slapped on Linux, it's still playable. Like you are running around like 150 FPS in FSR3 perf. Again, like the FSR3 is not ready to my test, especially in performance mode. It's not looking good at all. And that's the reason why I decided to also add the FSR4 performance in this graph on Windows to give you an idea of what you're going to be able to expect when the community is able to not only integrate FSR4 in Linux, but also solve the issue related to ray tracing. And you see the performance there is actually awesome on Windows. Having this type of quality of image at 260 FPS is, in my opinion, like a game changer. It has been a pleasure to play this game on Windows with FSR4 on. And you know, I'm actually like slapping the Linux driver right now, but on Windows it was not also perfect because the FSR4 feature is not ready out of the box on Windows. You have to use an application called OptiScaler to make it work. So it's there, but it has a new layer of complexity when you want to play your game. Hopefully, like when it's done, but you still have to do extra step and tweak for having the best experience on Windows 2. So, you know, again, like it's not perfect whether you are using Windows or Linux. And another point I want to mention, which was super important, and you will see it's going to be the same all across the bench there, is that if you look at the difference between FSR3 perf and FSR4 perf, in this specific case scenario, you're going to lose only 4% of performance moving from the mediocre FSR3 to the great FSR4. And I think this is really important to notice because you're not losing that much. And this is great. So good job, AMG, on this one. Now let's move to Cyberpunk, but without ray tracing. And here, the difference is totally not the same. So this is the same setting. I just remove the ray tracing here, and you can see that the performance it's totally like another world. It's really important to notice that here, if you move from Windows to Linux, you are only going to lose between 11% and 16% of performance, whether you are using FSR3 quality or FSR3 performance. The game on Linux is more than playable at 310 FPS or 240 FPS with FSR3 quality. If you look at the difference between FSR4 perf and FSR3 perf, it's again around like 4%, which is nothing crazy and totally like enjoyable on Windows. And yes, this number you will see is going to be the same each time I tweaked a game with OptiScaler. You don't lose that much compared to the incredible like visual gain you get. It's not perfect, obviously, because you still lose performance between Windows and Linux. But I would say you are in a performance type of ballpark, which is still like super enjoyable on Linux. Now, the next game I decided to test is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. This game runs on the Crytek engine, and I set the game to Ultra. And you will see here, I was really surprised that the difference is not that big. You can get a solid 149 FPS with FSR3 perf versus 153 FPS on Windows. So the gap between Windows and Linux is really small on this one, between 3 and 5%, which is kind of like almost like a margin of error for FSR3 perf and 5% for the FSR3 quality. Yes. This is gonna be a really solid experience. For me, I will just run the game in high and I will get around like 190 FPS, which is just awesome. Here, no frame generation, nothing, great FPS, and almost aligned with Windows, which is great. Another quick mention to FSR4 here, just lose around like 4% between FSR4 perf and FSR3 perf, which is aligned with our finding on Cyberpunk. So this is great. You definitively don't lose any performance moving from one to the other. Now let's talk about Marvel Rivals. So Marvel Rivals has been like totally crazy on Linux, and you're gonna see why. My settings for this game is frame gen off, and everything set to low AKs perf on the settings. I do play like that for a simple reason. It's a competitive game. We don't really care about graphic. We want to have the most FPS possible to reduce the input lag. And here, my friend, I have to say that the performance on Linux has been insane. With the FSR3 quality, I will have around like 343 FPS to my magic spot and 420 FPS with the FSR3 set to perf. And when you compare that to Windows, it's between a 41 and 31% increase from moving from Windows to Linux, depending on the upscaler setting you are using. So here, there is a little but, I would say, or maybe a big but, I don't know if you want to look at it, but there is a little issue, I believe, on Windows, and that's why the performance was not as great. We had some type of like image which was a little bit darker when playing the game. I tried to fix it, but I was not able to fix it. I still wanted to put the result out there because what it shows is that if you are running this game and you have a 9070 XT, well, you better play on Linux. Simple as that. You just better play on Linux. You're gonna have a better experience on Linux than on Windows. So here, it's a pretty good surprise and a big win for Marvel Rivals. I hope they're gonna be able to fix the driver on Windows. But until they do it, well, Linux it is. So the fourth game I want to talk about is Valheim. This game runs natively on Linux, and I really like to put it into my bench because I believe it's really representative of the type of experience you will have on a fully native Vulkan game. On KachyOS, you have like 347 FPS in ultra setting in 1440p, which is crazy. And on the other hand, on Windows, you have 373 FPS. And when you calculate the difference between each of them, it's around like 7% decrease if you move from Windows to Linux. So it's not that bad, knowing that the drivers are not even like 2 weeks old as we speak. So yes, pretty good. Now the last game is Monster Hunter Wilds. And this one, I've been testing it through the benchmark by setting everything to ultra. And I've done like one bench with frame generation on and one bench with frame generation off. And what you can see is that between Windows and Linux, you will lose between 5 to 10% depending if you keep frame generation on or off. Frame generation kind of like reduce the gap of performance difference between Windows and Linux. And this was pretty also interesting to watch for this game. I do believe like the game will be like totally playable on both platforms. But again, like interesting to see that the performance gap itself is not that crazy. Now let's talk about average. I know like the sample is not that big, but I think it kind of gives you an idea of where we are at. Like there is trends which kind of like are repeatable all across the game. The first trend is that if you enable ray tracing, you're gonna take a huge slap in the face on Linux. And here it's around like minus 43% average, which is kind of rough. Now, when it comes to the game which are not running ray tracing, the performance slap is a little bit lighter. It's around like 8% in terms of FPS if you move from Windows to Linux. And you will notice that if I include Marvel, you will have an increase of FPS. But I didn't really include it because I think it's not representative. And the Marvel game on Windows is just broken with this specific card. And before we move to the conclusion, I need to talk about content creation. A lot of you guys have been asking me in my YouTube comment, like, what is the situation with content creation on both Windows and Linux? Like, where are we at? So on Windows, this is where I've been editing all my video for the last week and a half. I think I did like five video. DaVinci Resolve is working properly. The experience has been great. I would say like compared to a 1490, it's still a little bit subpar when it comes to going across the timeline. In terms of export, it's a little bit slower too. I also had issue related to AV1 video reading. For whatever reason, when I'm using the 9070 XT on Windows, my AV1 video, they get imported correctly in DaVinci Resolve, but when I play them, they are all stuttery. And I didn't change any setting of my recording on my OBS on the other side. So it's definitively come from the Windows driver. There is something wrong there. So I had to change my workflow just to be able to do those videos. I had to move everything from AV1 to HEVC, which was not a problem in itself, but still, you know, like more work and a little bit of deception, not being able to read AV1. Like, it's kind of me, but it is what it is. When it comes to rendering, it's a little bit slower with this AMD card, but nothing crazy. I would say that the experience on Windows is great, but it's not at a level of a, you know, like production NVIDIA card. Okay, like Obviously, this is not the same level, same category. The 4090 is like the high end. 9070 is more like a middle plus type of graphic card. Definitely not the same price. But I would say, like, could you create content on DaVinci Resolve with this card? Definitely. Now, DaVinci Resolve on Linux is a totally different story, because DaVinci actually recognized the card because the OpenCL driver actually worked out of the box. I had nothing to do, just installed DaVinci Resolve. But some of the processing on Linux is linked to ROCm. And if you had any type of like fusion rendering on top of your editing, it will just crash DaVinci Resolve. So on Linux, I couldn't edit my video because there is some little like effect I put in my videos that I was not able to put there. And I didn't want to downgrade my video style just to run it on Linux. So I believe that the implementation of ROCm will solve that. But until then, you're gonna have to wait. Another point is linked to rendering. So you can render, but you can't encode with the card. So you will be able to render on your CPU, but you can't render on your GPU with DaVinci Resolve. There is no option. So you have to go through the CPU, which is a real pain. And I own DaVinci Resolve Studio. So I tried with this and it was just not available. Will it be fixed in the future? I have no idea. Maybe if we have some Linux user out there with a previous generation of card, if they're able to export, for example, in AV1 or HEVC using DaVinci Resolve Studio, I believe it's possible. Some of my buddies were telling me it's possible, but just let me know in the comment below. Maybe it's just some type of issue that need to be fixed on Linux. But right now, it's just impossible. You have to use the CPU. Now for OBS, it was working great on both Windows and Linux. No problem. You can encode. Everything worked great. Because on Linux, mainly, like it goes through the VA API. So it just like work out of the box. No problem. So OBS Studio was great. And another little test I made, I did install KdenLive and did some editing. And I had no issue at all. You can export also using the GPU, no problem, because it goes through VA-A API. It's just a little script you have to do to make it run through it. So there, if you are using KdenLive on Linux, you're going to be great. And voila, this was the benchmark/review of the 9070 XT on both Windows and Linux, almost like 2 weeks after release. And let me tell you, like overall, it's positive. It's really positive because the card was working out of the box. You can see there is improvement everywhere in terms of like support of games, stability. We are getting there. Now, the elephant in the room is what makes this card so attractive, right? And in my opinion, what makes this card really attractive is one, the support of FSR 4. FSR 4 on Windows, I've been testing it. It's bluffing, okay? And I own a 4090 RTX. This is at the level of DLSS 4, in my opinion. There is some little, case scenario where the quality is a little bit inferior. But to the defense of AMD, DLSS 4 is not perfect too. So you are in this space where the visual jump between FSR 3 and FSR 4 is so insane from someone who never experienced DLSS. It's a feature that you're gonna need if you want to really appreciate this card. That's just my 2 cents toward the overall like benchmark and everything. And the elephant in the room is like right now FSR 4 is not available on Linux. Okay, and it's gonna take time, guys. So don't be in a rush to get the card and use it on Linux because it's gonna take time to get there. I believe we will have it for sure. It's gonna be a feature included on Linux, but lower your expectation and enjoy the card as it is right now. The second point I also think is really important related to this card is the improvement in ray tracing. So if you compare this card, the 9070 XT, to a previous generation card, you will see that the ray tracing performance is actually way better, even on Linux. But the overall support of ray tracing on Linux need a lot of work. And I know it has not as been like the priority of the Linux community, and I understand why, because the performance of the previous graphic card was making it kind of like the work not worth it at the end. But now it's there. And again, like, I don't want you to be disappointed if you get this card and you want to run it on Linux. The reality is that it's going to need a lot of work in Wine, in Proton, to get the best out of this card, simply because ray tracing is really complicated, and porting it to another like operating system like Linux is going to take a lot of work, guys. Like, let's be honest, like, this is more as a problem, in my opinion, than implementing FSR 4. So, yes, just keep that in mind if you want to get one of those cards. Follow maybe like my channel to see like what type of improvement we're going to get in the coming months. But yes, it's going to be a tough one. Now, in terms of recommendation, like, would I recommend this card? Yes, 100%. To me, if you are into the market and you want to get a card, this is the one to get, especially if you are on Linux. Some of those numbers are just like astonishing, and because of the actual like situation of the NVIDIA driver right now, even if I believe they're gonna get improved in the future, you're gonna have, I'm guessing, like in 3 to 6 months, the same experience as on Windows in terms of performance for the non-ray tracing game. You're gonna get FSR 4. Like, you're gonna be golden. The only like caveat would be maybe ray tracing. You might have to wait maybe 6 months more, even like 1 year more. But who really cares, right? Yeah, you will be at like 190 FPS instead of like 260 FPS. They're gonna be fine. Okay, you're gonna be fine. Yeah, I think that's all, guys. I have to tell you guys, like, I'm really impressed by this card. I had a ton of fun playing with it, testing it. I'm gonna keep it, and I'm planning to continue to do more benchmark in the future. Yes, definitely yes. So I want to thank again all the members of La Crème de la Crème Club who financially helped me to get my hand on this card. I had ton of fun, and I hope the information I did provide you guys makes sense for all the Linux users out there. But yes, yeah, it has been insane. Like, I don't know if you see it on my face, but it has been really fun to discover the AMD experience on Linux. It's not perfect. Don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, but it has been really fun. So guys, thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one. Bisous.